Okay. Closing keynotes. Did you have a good time? Did you learn something new? So you do know all the talks will be available tomorrow from today. So go to our YouTube channel, share it with your colleagues, share it with your friends. It's all about sharing the knowledge. But don't tell them about DevOps Belgium, right? Because we sell out way too fast. And if you tell it to your friends, they're going to try to get a ticket as well. You want to avoid that, right? So you just say, no, it was a virtual conference. It's just all on YouTube. You can watch it there. That's the strategy, okay? That's one thing. Or go to Vox Days, or go to other DevOpses. I mean, I'll tell that later on. But the other thing as well, it's the last day basically for us. Many of us are going to party tonight. The place to be is Beer Central, just so if you didn't know. Do watch out, Belgian beer do have a bit more alcohol than the English ones, so watch out for that as well. And other than that, look at our Flickr account, because that's where all the photos are. Beautiful photos by Dimitris. And it's copyleft, so you can use it if you're a speaker, and there's some good pictures. Not the cats and the dog ones, but beautiful pictures ones. You can just use it in whatever avatar or what else. The cool thing about having all these DevOpses, we have about 7 DevOpses, is that I run this one together with a great team as a headless chicken from fire to salads that are lost and all of those kinds of things. But for all the other DevOpses, I go as a tourist, and I can actually enjoy and see all these talks and great speakers. And this is where I actually saw Mark. Mark did a keynote at DevOps France, and it was only 20 minutes, but I really enjoyed it. And immediately after the keynote, it's like, Mark, you have to come over to DevOps Belgium, man. I mean, and you know what? I'll give you 45 minutes so you can entertain us. So it's my pleasure to introduce you, Mark Rendle.
Thank you, Stefan. Hello, Java people. I'm .NET. Yeah, I've been running around all week going, fucking. So yes, but no, you've all had a good time. So yeah, this is my Twitter handle on here. If you want to @ me, as people sometimes do. I'm actually dropping the mark though. I'm just going by Rendle. So if you actually want to talk to me, just go, oi, Rendle, and that works much better. And so, before I get started, I just want to reassure. This is the opposite of a content warning. This is content reassurance. Okay, so this is not all of programming's greatest mistakes, because nobody dies in any of these. Okay, it's a light-hearted, fun talk, and so I'm not going to talk about medical things. There's a very famous medical thing, and if you know about it, you do. The other thing, because I tend to do this in the last slot, it's a closing keynote for conferences, so I don't talk about aeroplanes, because quite a lot of the time people are going to leave the conference and go and get on one, and they don't want me going, oh, remember the Boeing 737? So yes, there will be none of that. Nobody dies. And nearly everyone died with one of them, but nobody dies in any of them. That said, there is a content warning. I'm going to swear. And in British, I'm going to use the F word. And if anyone does have a problem with that or is offended by that, then now would be the right time to fuck off. And I do mean, it came up on the subtitles. Oh, I love that. Yes. And I do mean now, because I'm going to start with a mistake that I made once, just to be fair. I'm not above this. So, I was working for a company, and we made membership management software for non-profit organizations, charities, professional organizations, that sort of thing. And you could construct really complicated, elaborate queries against the database. Our query engine was the strongest point. And once you'd constructed these elaborate queries, you could save them. And I can't remember the reason why, but the file extension we chose was MED. And so we called them MED files. So we released a minor version of this software, and I'm not don't know what went wrong. Something went wrong somewhere. I think somebody had forgotten to create a file new and had just opened the file for writing, and so it got appended to instead of overwriting it. Whatever happened, it corrupted these people's med files, and these had like hundreds, in some cases, hundreds of query criteria and filters and everything else. And I was the one that people went to fix things because I'm awesome. And so one of the support people came to my desk and went, Mark, there's something wrong with the new release and it's fucked up all the med files. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, have you got some examples? And so he gave me some examples and I looked at it and I figured out that I could actually write a little utility that would fix them. And so I went, so you want me to write an unfucker for the med files? And he went, yes, yeah. And so I went into Visual Basic 6 and I started a new project and it went, give it an 8-character name, because this was in the 90s. And I went, oh, God, I couldn't think of anything. So as a placeholder, I called it unfucker. And then I ran with it. And so it would pop up a dialog box that said, choose the med file to unfuck. And you would do that, and then it would display that in a little message box, and then the button underneath it said unfuck now. And then you would press that, and then it very briefly displayed a progress bar saying unfucking med file. And then when it had finished, it said med file successfully unfucked. And I thought it was quite funny, and so I thought it would amuse the support person if I gave him this executable, which was, I want to be perfectly clear, called unfucker.exe. And so I gave it to him, and I didn't hear anything back, just so he could test it on some more files that had got fucked. And then the next I heard about it was when I got called into the CEO's office because they shipped it. They shipped it, and the director of one of the largest membership organisations in the UK was the first person to use it, and he was not happy. And yeah, basically the only reason I kept that job is because, as I said, I'm awesome. But yes. And I've told that story. I always introduce this talk with that story because it's a silly mistake. It's a stupid mistake. And, I was only in my 20s at the time and these kinds of things happen. But yeah, and the talk has been done in a few places and it's on a couple of YouTube channels. And the thing that bothers me is, of all the things I've done in my entire career, this is the thing that I have become famous for. I am now Mark, Medfile Unfucker Rendle. That's why I'm dropping the Mark. I'm just going to be Medfile Unfucker Rendle from now on. But Twitter won't let you have a handle that long. So that's a silly, simple mistake. And then there are some of the bigger mistakes. And let's start with one of the most obvious ones, Y2K. Who was around for Y2K? Not was anyone, but who was around? Okay, yes. I was working over Y2K. I had to rewrite a COBOL system in Infomix 4GL because they figured since we're fixing the dates, we might as well rewrite 200,000 lines of code while we're at it. But no, Y2K is very interesting because originally it wasn't a mistake. Because you have to think of the context in which decisions were made, and we're talking about the 50s and the 60s, when data was stored on punch cards that had 80 columns, and each one of those columns was a byte, and so you'd like 80 bytes per punch card. And so space was at a premium. And then we got to the point where we had memory, and this is core memory. And that's not under a microscope, that is a photograph of it. And each of those little pins has they're like needles, like sewing needles. And then you pass wires through them, and it's basically knitted. They used to knit memory. And this stuff, when it was invented, the first sort of few iterations of this, it cost $1 a bit. Not a byte, a bit. And it came down pretty quickly. But when memory is costing you $1 a bit, then storing an extra 2 characters to say 1962 instead of just 62 is actually a consideration. Banking transactions, you think of the number of banking transactions that go through, every single one of them has a date stamp on it. So you're talking about huge amounts of data in those terms. And so it made perfect sense because it's always 19. It's always going to be 19, whatever it is, because it's the date the transaction took place. And if you're going to store date of birth or say, vaguely, some people were probably still born in the 19th century back in those days, but it made perfect sense. This was the COBOL type for a date field, a PIC9, which means it's a text field that stores only numeric characters, and it is 6 characters long. That was WSTX date in COBOL. And so it made perfect sense. But then this guy came along, actually in the 1960s. This is Bob Beamer. And he started talking about this in 1958, literally the year after Fortran was invented. So, you know, it's kind of like, this'll do for now, but obviously in 40 years, we're going to need to change it. And I just want to make everyone aware of that and make sure that we have a plan. And then in 1968, he was still saying the same thing. And then in 1978, he was still saying the same thing. And in 1988, he was still saying the same thing. Those of you who lived through it will remember that Y2K kind of entered the public consciousness in about 1993-94, when we had 6 years to fix all the software that we'd written over the previous 40. And Bob Beamer was just like, ah. And if we had done this at the point when memory became cheap enough, and we'd stopped, because this was the problem. In the 80s, memory was already at the point, and disk storage was already at the point where we could afford those extra couple of digits on the date fields. It wasn't really that much of a problem, but we just kept writing more software that only used 2 digits for the year. On and on until like 1993, 94. And then people started going, oh, we need to fix it. And we spent an insane amount of money fixing it. Estimates are somewhere around $500 billion was spent in the second half of the 1990s fixing the Y2K bug. And literally everyone I knew for those 5 years, at least part of their job was fixing the Y2K thing across all the databases and all the CSV files and IBM's weird formats that they have. And yeah, so you would think that we would learn from these mistakes. Actually, you wouldn't, because you work in software and you know what we're like. Other people might have thought that we would learn from these mistakes. These same other people, by the way, who went, well, that Y2K thing was a load of nothing, wasn't it? All that fuss they made about planes falling and nothing happened. And you're just like, yes, you're welcome. No, buy me a pint. Never mind. But no, did we learn from this? This happened 2 years ago to Microsoft Exchange on the 1st of January. The most widely used email server in the entire world had been using some kind of weird 32-bit integer to represent the date somewhere, and it rolled over and it became 2201010001, and Exchange stopped working. All the Office 365 Exchange, all the exchanges stopped working. That was a fun one. There's Y2K38, or the Apocalypse, which is when Unix's 32-bit signed integer runs out of time. They have mostly now patched that, and we're using 64-bit integers. And 64-bit integers will go up to way longer than we're going to last at the rate we're going, and down to nanosecond precision as well. But my favorite of all the things that kind of fall into this category is the Kennel Club Dog 38 bug. If you've heard of this, don't spoil it for the others. So in the UK, the Kennel Club, if you have a pedigree dog, like a fancy dog, and you know its history and its parents and its grandparents all the way back to when they were wolves, and you register it with the Kennel Club, and it has one of those fancy, like caramel sugar cookie Bitstrup the Third and whatever. But this is the thing. If you register a dog, let's say a golden retriever, and you have chosen this name for it, there could already be a golden retriever with that name. And so your golden retriever would become 2, or the second. And then if another person comes along with a golden retriever with the same name, it becomes 3. And obviously some names are more popular than others, and some breeds are more popular than others. And so they did get to this point where somebody tried to register the 38th dog of the same breed with the same name. And the database crashed. Can anyone who hasn't already heard this story guess what format they were using to store that number that would overflow, was fine up to 37 and then overflows at 38? Yes? Letter and it is letters. You're very close. Roman numerals. Because on the certificate it's in Roman numerals. If you're at a show, it's in Roman numerals, and it's just they had a 6-character field, and every number up to 37, and including 37, can be represented as less than 6 characters. But when you get to 38, because Roman numerals are weird, that's XXXVIII. And so there you go. And my favourite thing, though, is the way they fixed that. They added an extra character. I mean, the thing is, the code to format like an integer number as Roman numerals is extremely complicated, so I guess maybe fair enough, but no, I love that one. I saw that on the Stand Up Maths channel. Matt Parker had a bit about that, and I stole it, so yes. Let's talk about a mistake that is continuing to happen to this day. Enterprise. So, enterprise software development. Just the whole thing. The whole thing is a mistake. It's being done wrong, it's being done badly. I did the really crap thing, the sort of when somebody who's not used to public speaking has to do public speaking, and they go, the dictionary defines marriage. The dictionary defines enterprise as a business plan or project, especially one that is difficult or that may fail or lose money. I love that that's the criterion. Is it not difficult? Is it actually not likely to fail? Then it's not enterprise. But no, I have a new way of defining enterprise that came up this afternoon with the company I'm working with. You can tell you're working in an enterprise if you ask a why question and the answer is policy. Why can't I enable WSL2 on my Windows box? Policy. How do I have to do it? Raise a JIRA ticket. So I raise a JIRA ticket and then I get told, I raised the JIRA ticket in the wrong category. Can I raise it? And you're like, just tick the checkbox! But I have visual aids to explain what is wrong with enterprise development. This is the Scaled Agile framework for lean enterprise. This is the simple version of this. And the programmers, you see right down there in the bottom corner? So product owner, one person, has his title, and you can see that. Scrum Master, one person, has a title. That little mass of people next to him, programmers. Yeah, we don't even get our name under our job title underneath us. We are the least important part of this entire process. And that may explain why they are likely to fail. And they get worse. Just checking the sponsor list. No, there's only one of them I'm going to piss off by the end of the talk. Accenture, who I think renamed themselves to Monday at one point, and I don't know how that's going. But no, this is Accenture's Auto Scrum. What the hell is Auto Scrum? You just set it going and then go home. And it goes, hey, software. Probably as much software, actually, as if you all stayed at the office. But yeah, this, I don't even know whether, oh no, there we are, again, down bottom left there, product owner, scrum master, agile team. Agile team, of which the product owner and the scrum master are obviously not part. I mean, Scrum, in my opinion, is just a bad idea anyway. It takes the core principles of Agile and just boots them out the window and keeps what's left. Sticking auto on the front of it and versioning it with minor version numbers, no, that is not going to help. But it gets worse still, because then you get the Deloitte Agile landscape, which I'm pretty sure is the metro map of hell, on which Auto Scrum 1.1 and the Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprise are but a single stop. So yes, I just, stop it. Just tell us what you want and let us build it and give us admin permissions on our machines and... What did you do yesterday, Mark? I put in a request to have Docker installed on my machine for me, and then I browsed Reddit for 7 hours. What are you doing today? Well, judging by the ticket, which has still not been approved, Reddit for 8 hours. I have no idea how much that's cost, but it's a lot. So yeah. Sometimes you get programming mistakes that you can't patch, you can't fix them easily. Sometimes programming mistakes actually get turned into hardware. And the Pentium, Intel's Pentium chip, when they released it, which wasn't the 586, so we had the 286 and the 386 and the 486. The difference with the Pentium was that it had a floating point unit built in. Because for the younger people in the room, we used to have CPUs that could only do integer maths, and we would have to fake floating point maths in software. And if you bought a 486, you could buy a version of the 486 which had the floating point unit built in. You could also buy a version of the 486 which didn't, but you could buy a coprocessor to do floating point maths. The Pentium was the first processor where all of them had floating point built in, which was really handy because it was around the same time that Quake was released. And it was a marvel of engineering. And it was much, much faster, much, much better than anything that came before it. Entirely useless at this point. I mean, probably as much processing power as you get in one of those birthday cards that plays a song when you open it. But I keep moving backwards and forwards, and there's a guy with a camera trying to follow me, and I'll stand here. But no. So what is 4,195,835 divided by 3,145,727? That's right, it's 1.33382. But according to the Pentium, it was 1.33374. And you would be amazed how quickly somebody found that bug. Really, like, just straight away, somebody found that bug. And Intel went, oh no. And so they fixed it. And then they said, if you can demonstrate that this bug is causing you a problem, this, what is that, thousandths, 10,000ths and 100,000ths of precision being lost, and if you can prove that that's causing you a problem, and then we will send you out a replacement for free. And people went to enormous lengths to prove that it was causing them a problem. I can't rocket jump properly. It's not working. It must be the floating point. And eventually Intel just said, you know what, we'll just replace all of them at a cost of $475 million in old money, when that was a lot. We know how much the next one cost because the guy who caused it has put a price on it. Null. Yes. So where are you at with Java? Are you still with all the nulls? Kotlin with all the nulls and everything? We haven't got option types and result types and maybe types and all those kind of functional monady things that let people think they're better than us. But no, we have null. In C#, we have nullable reference types. So you can use a question mark to say, this could be null. And then the compiler can go, you haven't checked that to see whether it's null or not. And then you put an exclamation mark after it, which says, I'm pretty sure it's not, which defeats the entire purpose. Microsoft innovation. But no, so this is Tony Hoare, who is a dude and like a knight of the British Empire or something. He's got honours and everything. And Tony Hoare was working on a variant of Algol called Algol W, which was like, it wasn't object-oriented, but it was the first programming language that had the concept of records, of multiple bits of data being grouped together. So you would have like a person which had a first name and a last name and all that sort of thing. And when you have records, you know, if you have numbers, then you can kind of go, well, 0 means no number, or if 0 is the lowest, then you go -1 means no number. If you have strings, then you just go empty string means they don't have a middle name. But when you've got a reference to another record, like wife or spouse or something, and this person isn't married, then you're kind of like, well, what do I put in there? And so Tony Hoare, sitting there in his room, building Algol W, invented null. Chose the word, chose the concept. That was how it worked. And so this is Algol W, and you can see there that we've got a record person, which has a reference to person for father, mother, youngest offspring, and elder sibling. This is terrible code. All those middle children just being, hands up middle children. You don't count. But yes, and so you have to have a way of expressing there isn't an elder sibling or a younger sibling or any of those sorts of things. So he invented null, and he has called it his billion-dollar mistake. I think it's probably slightly more than that. It's just number of times I'm trying to install software and get null reference exceptions. And you just the thing I really like about it is by the wording of the null reference exception, you can tell what the back end is written in. It's kind of like, because .NET does it one way and Java does it another way, and other things just explode and catch fire. So yes, there are times when you can make a programming mistake that then makes its way into something really kind of big and solid. In the case of the Hartford Center. So the Hartford Center, kind of community center and ice rink and all that sort of thing in the United States. And this was built back in the days when computer-aided design was not like AutoCAD. It wasn't a graphical user interface. It was programming. It was a bunch of libraries that knew about tolerances and stress and strain and shear forces and all those sorts of things. And it was more like MATLAB than AutoCAD. And so you would put your figures in there and you would run the simulations and you would decide how many RSJs you needed and how many bolts they needed and what kind of welding to use and all this sort of thing. And the person who was programming the CAD for the Hartford Center, it's in Minnesota, or it's one of the northern states where it's very, very cold and it snows a lot in the winter. And so they put in the downforce of, like, if you had 2 meters of snow on the roof, how much would it push down? And so they put that in there. What they didn't put in was the shear forces when the snow slightly starts to melt and goes sideways and falls down that way. And that's what happened. That is a programming mistake. That is a programming mistake. Fortunately, as I said, nobody was even injured in any of these, okay? That is a programming mistake. It was empty, but the entire roof collapsed and the whole thing had to be rebuilt at a cost of $90 million. And that was in the 80s, I think. Okay. And then, this is my favorite one, I think, because they deserved it. Not the Hartford Center, this next one that Knight Capital. Knight Capital was a hedge fund. Anyone work for a hedge fund? Boo. Here's my brief foray into socialism. So, in the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company was building ships, and they needed money to build ships to go to India and steal all their stuff and bring it back and sell it. And they didn't have the money. They needed to build more ships than they had money for. And so they came up with the idea of selling shares in the Dutch East India Company so you could pay towards the building of the ships. And when they got back with all the stuff that they'd stolen from the subcontinent and sold it, they would give you a proportional share of the profits, which kind of makes this more like venture capital than what we now recognize as the stock market. But I think what happened at some point is maybe somebody bought a share in the Dutch East India Company, and then there was a sort of major life event or something, and he was kind of like, oh, I need that money back so I can pay for leeches, probably. Medical bills, leeches are so expensive. And so he went to somebody else and went, would you like to buy my share of the Dutch East India Company? And then you'll get the profit. And so they started trading the actual shares themselves between them. And it stopped being about dividends and started being about, oh, we just got a message back from India. They found diamonds. The value of this share has now gone up. And so I'm going to sell it to you. And so you fast forward 400 years, and you get the New York Stock Exchange, where shares are traded at ridiculous speeds, and nobody gives a toss about the dividends. It's all about buying shares, waiting for them to go up, selling them again, borrowing shares that you think are going to go down, and then selling them immediately, and then just before you have to give them back, buying those shares back again and then returning them, which is shorting and is this whole other thing. But there was a thing happening in the 20-teens, 2012 this happened. We started building algorithms to do the trading for us because the algorithms could buy and sell shares at millisecond latencies. And the millisecond, the thing would go up by fractions of a cent. But the number of shares that these things were trading over the course of a day, that added up to millions and millions of dollars being creamed off the economy and given to rich people to buy more boats. Fortunately, not to go to India and rob them, but you know, we don't need to go to India to rob them now. We just rob them by putting them in call centers. That's never got that political before. There's no script. I roughly know what I'm going to say. Sometimes words come out of my mouth. Oh, dear. So yes, anyway, the hedge funds and the investment banks and everything, what they'd done is they'd created their own server farms as close as possible, like literally buying real estate next to the New York Stock Exchange and running fiber optic cables through the wall so that they were as close as possible. And they just released these wild algorithms that just lived in these things, and they called them dark pools. And these things were just entirely ungoverned. There was no human intervention at all. And the New York Stock Exchange looked at this, and instead of thinking, we should stamp that out, that's clearly not doing society any good at all, they went, we're not getting a cut of that. And so effectively they created light pools, made the dark pools not allowed anymore, cut the fiber optic cables that are coming through the wall, and created this new system for doing exactly the same thing with a slightly different API. And Knight Capital had a week to adapt their code to run in these new light pools once the dark pools were shut down. And so they did what any of us would do. They took their existing code and they modified it. And they changed it, just changed little bits here and there. And because we're talking about sub-millisecond latencies and really super high performance, there's a lot of bit twiddling that goes on in this sort of thing. You've got like a 16-bit integer, but it's actually 16 different flags. And they had one of these, and the flags all meant different things. And One of the flags was supposed to mean that it was running in a simulation and it could do whatever it liked. It had no limits because they ran simulations to see what would happen if they did those things. And they thought they had repurposed that flag for the version that ran in the New York Stock Exchange. And mostly they had, except not everywhere. And so it went live. And it was running on 8 servers in the New York Stock Exchange. And by 9:30 in the morning, it had run up hundreds of millions of dollars of debt that it was going to have to deal with. And they're scrambling to try and find the reason. Doesn't occur to these people at any point to just stop. Just stop trying to make money while you fix this. You can probably do without those tens of millions of dollars. But no, try and fix it, try and fix it. They figured out that one of the servers out of the 8 was running a different version of the software from the other 7. And so they went, oh, well, clearly it's this one that's causing the problem. It wasn't, it was the other 7, but they patched that one. And by lunchtime of that day, when they finally pulled the plug, it had run up $4.5 billion of purchases, which have to be paid at the close of business on the same day. Knight Capital did not have $4.5 billion, funnily enough. This is just a little hedge fund. Some guy started it with his mates, his physics chums from university or something. And so the only thing Knight Capital could do was go to, I think it was Goldman Sachs who bailed them out and acquired them and sort of took on the debt. But they then shut Knight Capital down fairly quickly. And so Knight Capital lost everything. Goldman Sachs lost $440 million on that deal. And like I say, it serves them fucking right. Where are we at? Oh, that's good. Thank you. One person. I love these ones. Bugs in space. That makes sense to me because I watched the Muppets when I was a kid. And they went, pigs in space. Doesn't mean anything to you. How about this reference? Still no. God, I'm old. But no, sometimes we write software and we attach rockets to the bottom of it and we blow it up into the sky and wait to see what happens. They've literally just finished doing transistor hardness testing on the Europa Clipper satellite that's being launched at some point over the next few weeks because they wanted to make sure that the transistors could survive being hit by cosmic rays and all this sort of thing. But yes, even in the very, very early days, Mariner 1, so this was one of the first kind of interplanetary missions that we tried to send up there. And they call this the most expensive hyphen in history. This is an artist's impression of what Mariner 1 would have looked like had it made it into space. But this, is anyone here not actually a programmer, but you work in kind of like you're an analyst or a designer and you kind of write the specifications and the rules and everything? No? Just programmers. Right, so those guys suck, right? And sometimes they make mistakes too. For example, the mathematician who wrote some of the calculations that monitored the system during the initial takeoff phase, the R on the left has a line over the top of it. It's not a hyphen, but it's the closest sort of character that everybody knows. But the line over the R means smoothed over time. So you ignore the individual values, and what you pay attention to is the average over a given window. Because these tolerances and things, they're bouncing backwards and forwards because rockets make an enormous amount of noise and everything rattles like you wouldn't believe. And so you don't want to be going, oh, it just did this. But you want to go, is it doing that a lot? But they forgot to draw the line. And so the programmer came along and faithfully implemented the algorithm, the equation, as it was written in the maths thing. And literally, as soon as the thing had taken off from the launch pad, lights started flashing red all over the console in mission control saying, the rocket's going to explode, the rocket's going to explode. And the mission controller pushed a big red button that made the rocket explode. because they thought it was going to, and it's like, oh, this is going to explode. I'm going to be the one to do it. So yes, that's a spec mistake rather than a programming mistake. And this was back in the 60s, so this only cost $18 million. And it is actually credited with creating the discipline of software engineering. This is the whole sort of thing that belt and braces and checks and balances and code reviews and pair programming and all this sort of stuff. This was when we started doing that, because it was kind of like, we really can't leave this kind of thing up to chance. But it wasn't the last time that they did this sort of thing. And the Mars Climate Orbiter, Americans? Right, screw those guys as well then. They deserved this one too. This is the Mars Climate Orbiter. This was supposed to take off and go into orbit around Mars and monitor for dust storms, because a big part of sending rovers and things is how often are there dust storms, how long do they last, we need to know this sort of thing. And so they sent up the Mars Climate Orbiter, and it took off majestically, and it separated from the first stage, and it separated from the second stage, and it went off towards Mars, and it flew to Mars for 9 months or however long it takes to get there, and it started to go into orbit around Mars, and it went and crashed straight into the surface, and you can still see the big black mess that it made when it landed. And the reason why this happened is American exceptionalism, okay? You know how the Americans are better than all of us? Yeah? The problem is you can't be better if you're the same. And so Americans have to do different things, which means they can't use the metric system. They have to use feet and inches and all this sort of thing. So the total impulse calculation that worked out how hard the engine was firing and how much acceleration the Mars Climate Orbiter had reported the figures in pounds/seconds, which is the SI unit. The trajectory count, no, hang on. Pound/seconds is the imperial unit of impulse. And that was created by Lockheed Martin. And the trajectory calculation, the thing that took that information and then turned it into adjustments to the path, was expecting Newton seconds. And there are 4.45 Newton seconds to the pound/second. And so when you do that maths and you put pound/seconds into something that's expecting Newton seconds, then what you get is absolutely the wrong number, and you think you're doing this planned trajectory, but your actual trajectory is the bottom one, and you go kablooey at a cost of $327 million. So just to be fair, and I did do this in France as well, Ariane 5, the maiden flight of Ariane 5, one thing we've learned already from Night Capital, actually, but this is a better example of it, is don't copy and paste code. All right, or do copy and paste code, but only from Stack Overflow, not from your old Ariane 4 system. But completely separate systems, completely different computers. One was 16-bit, one was 32-bit. Bear that in mind; it's important. The Ariane 5 system was looking at an address in memory that it expected to contain a 32-bit float, and something else was looking at that same address in memory and putting a 16-bit integer in there, and this is what happened. And is it? Oh no, there we go. I'm not going to do that because we're running out of time. That's what happened. It got about that far off the ground, and then it majestically exploded. And at a cost of $580 million. But since then, the Ariane 5 program has gone without a hitch. And did they launch 6 yet? Have we done that? I don't know. So yes. I'm going to have to nip through these quite quickly because I've talked too much about other things. But the big rewrite, this is from my own personal experience, but we've all done this. You get partway into a project and then something better comes along. You go, oh, React 5, React 18, what are we on, React 32 or something? And so Yes, and we go, shiny, shiny, shiny things. I did this. I was, like I say, I'm a .NET developer. I had got quite a long way through building a whole new desktop application, weirdly to replace the one that fucked the med files. And, and I was doing it in Windows Forms, which was a bit shit. And then Microsoft came out with WPF, which actually with hindsight was a bit shit, but I didn't think so at the time. It looked much better, and it used XML in 2006, so it must be good. And so I went, I'm going to rip out all the Windows Forms code and replace it with WPF code, and I ended up working 100-hour weeks for about 6 months, gave myself a nervous breakdown, and ended up in hospital. Just stick with what you know, all right? I meant to change this slide so that it kind of faded in gradually, and you'll see why. It's a mistake. Brendan, we need a demo. You got a week. Build a demo in a week. Okay, I'll do that. I've made Scheme. Oh no, we're competing against Java. Make it look more like Java. All right, I've made Scheme look like Java now, I suppose. Here you go. Oh, you've added time on. Thank you very much. This is what happens when you're like headhunted by the guy running the conference, is he puts an extra 5 minutes on you. Nice. So yes, and Brendan, I mean, it was an amazing achievement. I'm not going to take anything away from Brendan Knight. He's an amazingly smart guy, and it was an amazing achievement to write a programming language and incorporate it into a browser and invent the whole idea of the DOM all in the space of a week. But yeah, maybe then slow down and kind of come back and go, should we do like classical inheritance rather than this prototype thing? What other languages do prototype? Self. Never heard of it. Neither had I until you told me to make this look like Java. But no. And so this is JavaScript. An empty array equals not an empty array. I love that one. B plus A plus A plus A equals banana. Essentially, the plus A in the middle there, it's trying to do like abs A, or, you know, to make A positive. And then it goes, you can't make A positive, it's not a number, so I'm going to turn that into nan. And so you get banana out. This one's brilliant. So document.all is, this is the DOM, is an instance of object. That's true, but the type of document.all is undefined. Does document.all equal undefined? No, it doesn't. Does it equal null? No, it doesn't. Does it kind of equal null? Just the two equal, oh yeah, kind of equals null. Doesn't actually equal null. Its type is undefined. There is only one object in the whole of JavaScript which has the type of undefined, which is the undefined signal object, but document.all isn't, yeah. And the mistake, though, the mistake with JavaScript was the day that somebody, who I shall not name, went, it's a shame this is only in the browser, though, isn't it? It's a shame we can only use this to make buttons glow when you move the mouse over them. I want to write entire systems in this language because it's so good. Priceless. Right, anyone from Google in the room? Because this is where it gets really fun. Now we've invented infrastructure as code, which means programming mistakes become massive data center outages, like the leap day bug when Microsoft Azure Storage in 2012, I want to say. Yes, 2012. And it was unavailable for an entire day because when they originally created the certificates for Azure Storage, they did it on the 28th of February. And so it renewed overnight to the 1st of March. And Azure came online in 2009, it was fine. 2010, it was fine. 2011, it was fine. 2012, the certificate tried to renew itself to adding a year to something and then issuing a certificate that expired on the 29th of February 2013. And there wasn't a 29th of February 2013, and so that went all completely sideways, and Azure storage crashed for an entire day, and I was there. It's not just Azure, shout out to AWS. On the 28th of February 2017, one of the S3 team members, using an established playbook and manual input, made a change with no validation. We didn't need validation because it was only team members with an established playbook, so why do we need to validate it? And bye-bye US East 1 for about a week. Took Netflix offline, took Apple offline, took the PlayStation network offline, everything was down. And shout out to Google. Hello, sponsors. Yes, Unisuper. A massive investment fund, $135 billion under management, 650,000 members, and they had a private cloud set up in the Google Cloud infrastructure. They were running in 2 data centers, failover, so if one of them goes down, the other one still stays up, and they had all the sort of backups and everything. And somehow, when they set up this private cloud in Google's data centers, somebody marked it as a pay-as-you-go subscription. I'm guessing manual input from an established playbook, but still, it was marked as a pay-as-you-go subscription, and then at the end of the month, it went to bill, and of course, there's no credit card on file for this. You can't use a credit card to pay for a duplicated private cloud, and so the billing failed, and they literally deleted it. This was automated. Your billing has failed. We've sent you an email to say your billing has failed, but in the meantime, while we wait for you to respond, we've deleted your 2 private clouds. And yeah, that was brilliant. I loved that. Okay. Honorable mentions going out to Heartbleed. I honestly can't even remember what Heartbleed was at this point. It's gone. Log4j, that was one of my favorites because it affected you guys and not me, and I was very smug. But no, Log4j, there's like weird expressions that you could put in, and then you could send them over Log4j, and then it would rehydrate them at the other end. We have a thing in .NET called binary formatter, which literally serializes an entire class, including the functionality, and then it'll deserialize it on the other side. And it was just a huge vulnerability and a don't use thing. And Log4j, these sort of Java embeddable executable expressions, basically the same thing. And then there was Java's implementation of ECDSA. So ECDSA, the way it works is it compares 2 numbers and it does a modulo thing, and the modulo should come out as 0. What Java's implementation didn't do was check that you hadn't just set the 2 numbers it was calculating the modulus of to 0. And so if you did that, then it would quite happily go, yeah, no, you're totally allowed to be here and doing the things that you're doing. Why have you deleted that cloud? So, just to finish on, the Soviet early warning system. This was very close. This is Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, and on September the 26th, 1983, he was sitting at his station and he was watching the Soviet early warning system, and it started beeping and flashing and telling him that there were 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles inbound from the United States heading for 5 major targets in the USSR, as it was at the time. And Stanislav Petrov looked at this and he went, niet. And he turned it off and on again, and he didn't tell anybody about it, and we did not have a nuclear war, and all life on this planet was not extinguished, and the place wasn't made an uninhabitable hellhole. Turned out it was the sun glinting off clouds. Just sunlight, just reflecting off the clouds. But yes, so nearly all known life in the universe, but not quite. So that's my mistakes. I'm Mark Rendle on Twitter. If you have any of your own favourite mistakes, or go onto the YouTube when this is published on YouTube and tell me some of your favourite mistakes as well. But I hope that was a fun way to end this second day. Some of you, I think, coming back tomorrow for more talks. But there's a movie happening and all sorts of stuff and beers and everything else. I'm going to Brussels now because I've got a train in the morning. So it was lovely to be here, lovely to meet some of you, and I will hopefully see you all again sometime. Cheers. Bye.